Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is Jonas, reporters for the 10th. Well, we can see the other day, nice move on the continuation off of what was again reading right here, that yellow candle. And this all stems from, well, the Power Mode 2 tick up, magenta cross below. At that point, we had just started to see short-term buyers activating within this, and then that followed through with mid-term buyers, and now obviously also long-term buyers. We're seeing a little bit of short increase at this particular point, along with our shakeout turnaround, but we're above the EBM magenta, and we're hitting right up against the EBM gold. It's hard to see it with the other lines converging, but that would be at 38.89. So tipping right back towards that 3,900 range, and of course that just puts us, 60 or so points off the highs. Not bad. NASDAQ got a long way to go as far as relative strength to it, but they made a strong turnaround move the other day of same thing, the short-term buyers. Of course, they're getting a little bit into the extreme. We don't have it overbought with the extreme histogram, but over that 13.5 for the steel, it's going to have to really maintain itself, and you're going to need to see it tick up here pretty strong, at least moving into that new range with the negative 1396 on red above that negative 13.5 should be enough to sustain things. But if it fails to do that, we might get another rollover on our shakeout, and it's already really negative from the NASDAQ. And so that divergence creates a much bigger swings is what we're seeing, and that's that volatility that's taking place. We had the orange finally did dip below green, at least. It's right at red. We're at minus 22, and before we were minus 25. Usually it's enough to generate a bounce. It did the last time it was here, although it was short-lived, and then once we dipped right here, creating the same thing, and it doesn't look like it's going to be sustainable for any length at this particular point. The shakeout is still really ugly, and you're not getting any real help from the Power Mode 2 at all. So kind of crazy. The directional lines at like 275, which is like so oversold, kind of equivalent. And from a euro standpoint, again, at the bottoms, again, we're dealing with more little bird exit issues, but really it's the U.S. turnaround, and that strength certainly is going to put pressure on it. Of course, the U.S. is going to fight back and want to drive that back up. A lot of this gets back into treasuries, yields, and some of the rate changes that are starting to get built into the setup, and that could cause some difficulties for stocks going forward into March, particularly as we get to the Ides of March. Here we have from an intraday standpoint, generally marking some of this. And once we started on this upward trajectory, little yellow dot there, which was that dip below, and then the orange coming underneath, giving it that buy configuration. But every time we were dipping below, cyan under red, we were just taking off from there. I mean, these were significant moves that took place from 63, and then you ended up with it back underneath red at 70. And then by the time you get the next one, you're up at 85. So it's like, these are double-digit gains going forward on all of those. Even when the ones that were just going across, every DOC spread in that was so muted, because you look at the Power Mode 2, you weren't getting any dip with breakout of any kind. And the only time it did happen over here, you ended up with it, and then it was just a couple bars later, you ended up with exactly the inverse of that. But the Power Mode 2 directional staying at that 13.5 range and above through almost all of that move right there, until we started to get this little crazy Ivan within the Power Mode 2, suggesting that there was some disruption in the algos. And then so by the time we got the next DOC spread, we started to see a little bit more difficulty in sustaining it. You had this relatively quick buy that just turned around and started to fade, and then gave the collapse signal secondarily right here on the declining Power Mode 2 with the magenta crossing above it. And you can see where those signals come through when you do get that turnover in the directional downward, and then the Power Mode 2 crossing really tends to make a difference. It's also something I'm adding into the yellow dot configurations that will come in afterwards, because you definitely want to see that uptick with the crossover as a definitive kind of indication that you're going to get some type of turnaround. Saw it right here with this signal where it doesn't have that confirmation. You can see we continued in the downturn, though won't be using the yellow dot within green configurations at all, but this will be a red configuration anyway, because coming off that yellow candle, you immediately ended up with this reverse spike of steel dipping back below and orange popping up with green under red was clearly not going to go anywhere. And that has led to, well, this cascade lower all the way through until we get this configuration right here, that exact same reset below zero and orange dipping down as the red started to climb, and put in the signal right there. It still suffered a little. Let's see what the drawdown on that was. We went from 60 to 56, so just under 4 point drawdown before then the monster moved back up. So from 60, where we currently are at 79, it's almost 20 plus points right there. So working effectively, and actually should have color coding on that I think later today, which has been refined enough that we'll start to change the paint bar. And if I have that done, I will certainly send it out intraday, even just so you'll have the adjustments on it. Because what happens with Power Mode 2, Diacon Ping 2 here is, when it gets to its cell stop off this, because having to add the extra language on the conversions to flip, it then goes into a no trade mode until a new reset has happened. But as we see, sometimes you can get these very long extended runs with no steel reset below the red. That's where having the yellow dot, or at least that buy configuration setup available, certainly will help. And you can see this was all under gold rising. That was the point of why these candles turn gold, because it's shakeout gold. It just makes it easier from an identification standpoint. But that's the long and short of it for right now. As always, though, I will put up relevant details on Skype chat. Trade well.